So, welcome to the first episode of Dees Art Podcast. And I have with me Phil White, who used to be a radio presenter.
Yeah.
Welcome, Phil.
Well, lovely to be here. We talked about this. I mean, a long time ago, you came on my radio show, I remember, Liz, and after it you said, I'm thinking about doing a podcast. You fancy doing it with me? And that must be, I'm going to say 7 years. It might even be slightly longer ago. No, it might even be 10, but...
I do remember that, yeah. And you were sort of under contract and couldn't
take part. It makes it really tricky with it, yeah.
But now you're
I'm not.
Free.
So, free for a good couple of years now.
Yeah. Brilliant. So, once a month, every month, I'm going to be talking to a guest, and we're going to be talking about subjects around the theme of art subject, making art, what's in art, that kind of thing. So every month, in the early part of the month, say as close as possible to the first of the month, these will be uploaded to YouTube. So keep your eye out.
Make a note in your diary.
Yeah. So our first topic, subject that we've decided to talk about today is basically midlife creativity. Why starting later is powerful, not limiting. So that's the theme.
Yeah.
Today we're going to talk about starting or restarting creativity in later life and why that might actually be an advantage rather than a setback. So, when did creativity first show up in your life?
When I was about 2. It was really weird because although you introduced me very kindly by saying, former radio presenter, the radio presenter thing was never something that was in my game plan at all. Some radio presenters have wanted to be radio presenters since they were 8 or 9, and that wasn't me. I had a pencil in my hand from about the age of 2, and I had 2 very talented twin cousins who were amazing with painting and drawing, and even at the age when I was 2 and 3 and they would have been 12, 13, I can remember going round to my aunt's house and having beans on toast for tea, and then Linda and Susan would get all their paints and drawing stuff out and we would play together.
Yeah.
And so really by the time I got to school I was more than happy with which way the pencil went and how to use it, and then all the way through secondary school I went to art college as well, and it was only off the back of that the radio kind of happened. But all the way through, even through the radio, the many years of radio, I was still painting and drawing.
Yeah.
So now I'm doing it full time, but it's only been a couple of years since I've been doing it full time. It is a very different endeavour when you're doing it full time, because before that, I don't know how you find it, but you can pick and choose a little bit. Of course I'll do you a portrait or a painting of your dog or whatever as a sort of a one-off. But suddenly when you're in there and you kind of have to do it every day for whatever reason, it's a very different thing. I wish I'd done it years ago. Actually, I do.
Yeah.
I enjoyed the radio thing, but
Yeah.
I wish I'd been a full-time painter years ago.
Yeah, I kind of agree with you there. Going back to being surrounded by art and art materials and creativity, I think sometimes, in my opinion, sometimes musicians become really great musicians because they're surrounded by instruments and music.
Yeah.
And it's part of their world. So that was part of your world.
Yeah.
But there's another element there that you've got to want to do it. You've got to want to pick up that pencil and start drawing with it. So
there has to be something that motivates you to want to do, as you say, whether it's a pencil drawing. We're surrounded by your lovely paintings, some of which are quite big, and a big painting is quite an undertaking. I don't think people realise that it's a real commitment.
Yeah.
I've always really enjoyed materials, and even though I love painting, and it's great if you do a landscape that looks like a landscape, I suppose. For me, actually, a lot of the joy of painting is that thing of picking up a big dollop of paint and actually getting it onto a canvas. And that means that as a painter, or as a creative, because it's more than paint, but as a creative, I love to explore that. So I love to use pastels and watercolours. And how does that happen? What happens if I take that and put it on here? I know I shouldn't do, but how does that all work? All that exploration is really exciting.
It's about experimenting and breaking the rules.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Or at least testing the rules, pushing them. So, sorry, I just want to carry on discussing your history just a little bit. So, you did really well with art and design at school.
Yeah.
you ended up at art college.
Yeah.
What on earth did you do at art
I
college?
did a degree in theatre design. Because I did, like most people that do a degree of something arty, you have to do even back then in those dim distant days, you still have to do a foundation year. And I really wasn't that clear quite where I wanted to go. I didn't think it was going to be a fine art type thing. But I'd always enjoyed theatre. I'd always enjoyed performance. I always enjoyed the sort of the magic and the mystery of what happens in that black box. So I thought, what the heck, let's do that. And at the time, there were only 3 colleges in the country that did a degree in theatre design, and I ended up in Nottingham at Trent there, and it was a lovely course. I didn't benefit from it as much as I should, because you're 18, 19, you're young, you're stupid, you're getting drunk a lot, and I wish I could do it again, frankly, because the facilities were wonderful, the staff by and large were brilliant, but it did introduce me to lots of stuff that, people say, the radio and theatre, surely there's no comparison. But it did teach me a lot about sound, which of course was really useful.
Yes.
I've always known a bit more about lighting than most people when it comes to using lighting creatively. There was a whole load of stuff around, putting on shows that, whether it's in the theatre or whether it's on the radio, there are real similarities. So it was a very good and very broad kind of grounding in that performance thing. And the actual, I remember quite vividly the end of my second year, the second year students, as is still quite common, will help the third year, final year students do their degree show. And I ended up at a stately home just on the outskirts of Nottingham, helping this lady called Sue, I think her name was, with a recreation of 16th century opera, which it was about as interesting as it sounds, frankly. But I was there one day over the summer holidays, helping build this set and painting it up and, following instructions. And she'd gone, and I was the only person there. And the local TV, the equivalent of Look North, turned up and said, we've come to do some pictures and an interview about this opera. And I said, well, you'll have to come back because I'm the only person here. And they said, well, you can't come back. It happens now or it doesn't happen. So I ended up doing this interview, and there was a radio thing that came off the back of that. And by the time I'd done that and I'd done the radio thing, I'd been identified as somebody who could talk for England and was being encouraged to do all sorts of radio stuff, which I quite enjoyed. And I did. I finished my degree. I really worked a day in anger in a theatre because I was always lucky that the radio stuff kind of came along.
Yeah, so that's how it all began, really. Yeah. Right.
And I've still got, vaguely in contact with one or two people I did a degree with who are now in their senior years like I am, and they're still doing bits of theatre. And I did enjoy it, and it did excite me, and I would like to go back and use some of those skills. I mean, particularly the sound thing, particularly the lighting thing. And for a long time, I've had this just rumbling in the back of my head about how paintings can, the viewing of paintings, that whole experience can be enhanced by sounds. For example, if you put in a really, really low rumble, it doesn't have to be anything more than a really, really deep low rumble. It can make a room feel quite chilly. It can make a room feel like it's very mysterious in some kind of way, and that would add a different thing to your paintings.
Sound evokes emotion, doesn't it? I find
totally does.
If you add music to anything, a video, a promo video or anything, it can make it feel a certain way. So it's interesting how, we're digressing just slightly.
That'll happen. That'll happen with the podcast.
Mentioned about how you kind of wished you'd pursued painting earlier as a full-time activity or a career or your profession, I guess you don't regret being a radio presenter. Because
it was wonderful.
I'm sure it was.
Yeah, totally enjoyed it. And like many people, when they've done a job for a long time, there's always a degree of nervousness about leaving an organisation, especially the BBC, because it's a big organisation, and what the heck's coming next? Well, the BBC don't owe each other anything, and off we've gone. And at that point, my wife said, well, you've talked about it for long enough, so why don't you do the sort of full-time painting thing?
Yes.
And so I leapt. If I'd done it 10 years ago, I think I might have had possibly just a little bit more energy. I've still got plenty of energy, but as whether it's energy or whether it's view of the world, I don't know. At 65, I have very much a view of the world, and I look around, we might talk about this, and I see how funding works, and I see what people are doing over here, and I think, Yeah, I know, but I've been there. I've kind of seen that. I know it's not going to work. Whereas 10 years ago, 15 years ago, I might still have been a little bit fuller of optimism for some of these things that I now look at and think, it's never going to work. Why are you spending money on that? You know. But no, I mean, I think
when we're younger, I know I spent a lot of time trying to prove my worth to people.
Yeah.
And it's sort of optimism, but drive to achieve.
Yeah.
And maybe, I mean, I'm 57 now, so I'm a little bit behind you, but...
You're a long way behind. I've got to tell you.
I feel, you know, I've less to prove to people. You know, we've done a lot in our lives in various different professions. We have proved ourselves already.
Yeah.
So I feel as I'm older, the need to prove myself to anybody is not there anymore. I think it's free. I think it's freeing. For me, it's freedom to pursue things because I just want to pursue them. You know, not because I'm going to be a certain position.
Yeah.
You know.
Interesting. The one thing, one of the many things actually, having a radio career taught me was not to take myself too seriously and. At the same time, have that sort of single-mindedness of thought to an extent, because when you're a radio presenter, you get to hear what people think about you. You know, there's a little machine ticking away in the corner that you don't have to look at, but I think everybody does. And a lot of the time, it's really lovely and complimentary. But a lot of time as well, it's not, and people think...
These are the texts.
And they're coming in and people, you know,
things.
variations on a theme of what on earth is this person doing on the radio, and not as polite as that. So you kind of grow a bit of a hard skin. And we all know that the sort of art we're talking about, or any kind of art really, and creativity is hugely subjective. You know, and what makes you excited about a painting or a piece of sculpture or a piece of sound installation might do nothing for me, and vice versa. And that doesn't actually, in a strange way, doesn't mean anything about the artist. And I spend a lot of time these days teaching and with people at various levels on their artistic journey. And it is so interesting that, you know, people that are doing it for years will come along to a workshop and they'll pay money to come along to a workshop.
Right.
And about an hour in will say, no, I don't believe you. I think this is rubbish. And you think, well, okay, what are you going to do for the rest of the day then? You know, have an early lunch break. That sense of exploration and wonder that I still have about materials and where they might go doesn't exist in everybody.
No. How do you think your work is different because you started later? So this is about life experience and how it's informed what you do now, I guess.
And it's back to that point I was making earlier for me about loving materials, loving experimenting, loving to feel free to break the rules. And I really am not bothered most of the time when I'm standing in front of a canvas. I'm not that bothered what's coming off the end of my brush at that particular point. And I have that. I think I probably do have a process. It depends what I'm painting. I have a very different process for watercolours, obviously, compared to anything that might be acrylic or oils or pastels. But I like the sense of abstraction you get with mark making. I'm a big mark maker, so I think that one of the things I've got over the years of doing this that I wouldn't have had 25 years ago. I think I would have still been learning about my materials.
Yes.
Whereas now I feel, this sounds really cocky and it's not supposed to, because I know full well next time I pick up a brush it'll bite me on the bum. But I have a sense that if I'm going to make a painting and I choose to do it in acrylics, for example, I've got a sense that I know what I'm doing with the materials, and I don't have to think about that too much. Earlier you used an example of, you know, musicians and talking about how musicians are in a certain situation with other musicians, and I do see my painting I see as being very similar to somebody who might be a jazz musician, in that they've got a mastery of their whatever it is they're playing, whether it's
their instrument.
Yeah, exactly.
They know what notes, you know, how to achieve a note,
and that means they can play jazz. You know, and without that mastery, it's very difficult to play jazz at a great level. And I feel, because I'm not saying I paint at a great level, don't get me wrong, but I feel I don't have to worry too much about thinking about my materials. You know, I feel I can make it up reasonably successfully as I go along.
That's a great analogy, actually, especially for somebody who paints in a kind of impressionistic, expressionistic, semi-abstract way. really.
Yeah.
So, you know, that your paintings are the analogy of jazz,
Yeah.
really. I think that's great.
Absolutely. And you have to know, but it's not just your materials, is it? It's right, have a sense of freedom with different brushes and mark making implements. You've got to have definitely a background knowledge about colour theory, but not so dependent on it that it starts ruling your painting. Again, if you want to break those rules, you can do.
So I guess throughout your professional career, where you've dabbled in and you've explored mark making and materials and art and different kind of meat and all of that. You've done it in a way where there's no pressure, because you weren't painting. You were painting for pleasure.
Yeah.
It was your kind of hobby.
Yeah, if I can get a couple of £100 here and there for a commission, great. But
As an aside, it was like a side hustle, really.
Yeah.
But that meant that you kind of, achieved a level of knowledge, that most degree students probably haven't even achieved by the time they graduate.
Yeah.
It's a lifelong sort of.
Well, I think it
takes
is.
time.
Yeah,
it takes time,
does.
doesn't it?
And I remember quite definitely the time I started taking it more seriously, and our son had just been born, and he's 22 now. But I remember thinking, right, if I'm going to do anything with this painting at any point, I do need to take it a lot more seriously. So I can put a real definite sort of mark in the sand and say that was the point at which I thought, right, I'm going to start learning about this stuff. So I've got it well and truly under my belt by the time if I do need to, or even if I don't need to, but at least I'll know.
So how does it feel since you, I guess, retired? So how does it feel to be able to paint full time now?
Yeah, mostly really good. It's slightly frustrating that although I got off to an absolutely banging start and sold quite a lot, and I thought, okay, this is going to be all right. But I can't remember what happened, but there was some sort of economic collapse due to something or other, and suddenly people are not really buying paintings.
The cost of living crisis happened,
probably. At the kind of price I tend to sell at, people are suddenly not really that interested in spending their money as much on art. And I think you're probably a little bit protected if you're doing statement pieces that cost 10, 15, 20 grand. The people that have got that money are not. They've still got that money.
They've still got that money.
It's the marginal spenders that. So I'm still painting. I'm still enjoying painting as well. I'm doing a lot more teaching, but actually I'm quite enjoying that. I wasn't sure that I would, but I do, because a case in point of a young man who's on a course of mine at the moment who's 30. I won't tell you who he is or anything, so I'm not totally sure of the backstory. But I know he's had a former life as a chef, and all the standing up all the whole time has wrecked one of his hips.
Oh, no.
So at that young age, he's had to have a hip replacement. Doesn't want to go back to chefing.
Me.
Doesn't know if he can draw. Well, I can tell you can draw. Crikey, he turned up with a sketch pad the first thing, and I gave him a pencil. And by the end of it, I'm thinking, blimey, the marks were just... He doesn't know, of course, he doesn't know.
He doesn't see it himself,
no.
but you can see his talent.
Yeah, absolutely. I can't wait to see where he ends up in the next 5 years. So I find that stuff really...
Well, that's really interesting that an illness or a disability or a medical issue has pushed him into pursuing a creative subject or something that doesn't involve standing up all the time.
Yeah.
Similar to me, really, with my MS, I kind of...
You have to adapt.
You adapt.
Yeah.
And, what's great, I think, is thanks to medical science, we all live longer and we're all healthier to a lot older age. So when we sort of pursue painting, drawing, whatever, creativity, that we all kind of left until retirement. However, we're bringing that forward because we're finding ourselves in a position where we have...
Yeah.
It's like a latter stage career. It's like somebody said to me the other day about what are we going to do with the last quarter century of our life?
Yeah.
And so people are finding themselves kind of retired, but still incredibly able to do things and to pursue things. So,
can I tell you, the first thing I say to people, cut across your thought process here a bit, is when they come to me, and often they are a little bit older, to take your point there, the two things I say to them is, don't expect to be able to sit down at the piano and play a Beethoven sonata any more than you can turn up here today and be drawing like Rembrandt, because that ain't going to happen.
Yes.
And the other thing is you've got to show up. If I can convince them to get a sketchbook and a couple of pencils and just for 10 minutes of an evening when they're sitting there watching Pointless on telly, have the sketch pad out and draw their cat, draw some, just anything, because that training of the hand-eye coordination, that
Yes.
thing of making
The motor
marks,
skills.
all that
Yeah.
stuff.
Yeah.
Really start, quite quickly. You can start polishing those up, and I think there's that pressure. The other side of that coin is the pressure that people do. They do get if they go along to an art group for 2 hours, and they think by the end of that 2 hours, it might be the only 2 hours they have in a week. You think, right, I must produce a masterpiece, and the pressure to do that leads to all sorts of disappointment. It stops that thing of wanting to learn, experiment, and have fun. I can't possibly have fun. I've got to draw this ship on this lake. How can I have fun doing that? And for me, it's all a little bit upside down. So I spend a lot of time trying to convince people to have fun and experiment.
Yeah.
And bit by bit, that will.
I think people
come
attend
together.
lessons because it gives you that dedicated time. You kind of set aside that time.
Yeah.
You allow yourself that
Yeah.
time, really. You ignore the washing up and that kind of thing. It's sort of don't let other things in your life get in the way.
But you have to put it into the context.
Yeah.
So we're lucky enough that this is what we do. So if you or I make a painting today that sucks, doesn't matter. We'll do another one tomorrow, and that painting becomes just part of our journey.
Yeah.
Whereas if you're 2 hours a week and your lesson is I've got to do a painting, it's So it's
trying to communicate to people that the pressure's off.
Yeah.
Allow yourself to have fun.
Yeah.
And
Put it in the right context.
It's about the journey and not
Yeah.
necessarily the results.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people that are sort of further at the beginning of their journey, and they're still learning, and that they're very quick to berate themselves, and it can absolutely crush your confidence and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But I think it's really important to look back on what you've done. Just keep doing it, and then a lot of people that work in a sketchbook, just keep going, and then at some point look back on that first page again.
Yeah.
And see where you've come to.
Absolutely.
Chart your progression. And that does great things for confidence, I think. Really.
The other thing I talk to people about a lot and increasingly, and along with the Beethoven sonata thing and everything else we just talked about, is this thing of the left brain and the right brain. And you've got to have a left brain going on there, because it's the left brain that stops you getting run over when you walk out in the middle of a street, not thinking, this kind of stuff. But it's also the left brain that looks at the marks you made on a bit of paper and says, "I look like a fish. What's that squiggle all about? That's not a fish." Whereas your right brain's going, "Oh, fish, 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 fish." Your left brain's going, "God, you suck. You're really crap at this." And actually, you need to come up with techniques to shut your left brain up. And things like drawing negative space, drawing upside down, drawing blind contour, drawing with the wrong hand. All these things kind of help that shut the left brain up and allow the right brain to have some creative fun. And I think it's the left brain thing, not just in drawing and painting, but in life, it all comes back to that thing you were saying there about, you can look at other people's artwork and go, "My God, that's wonderful." But their inner critic, their left brain will say, "Don't like me, that colour? Really, that colour? You serious?"
We're our own biggest critic, aren't we, really? Yeah.
But as human beings, not just as painters or artists.
Somebody I was chatting to the other day also, I remember saying that us artists, we have to sort of live in the real world. So ideally, we'd love to live in our right brains and just enjoy,
just
be free, and enjoy everything, enjoy music, enjoy art, and who cares about paying the bills? But unfortunately, artists have to live in the real world as well. So that brings me on to monetarization of art. So the selling of, not everybody sells their work. Not everybody even entertains the idea of selling, but you do, obviously, and that's been one of your motivations in the past. So what do you think when you sell a piece of art? What does that mean to you?
What does it mean? That's interesting. And it depends how that sale happens, because there's various points along that journey that give you, you get a sense of approval about something. So if it goes through a gallery, for example, I've got paintings in a few galleries, that's nice, because there's the process that you've already gone through the process of knocking on the gallery door and saying, "Hello, I've got these paintings," and hopefully they say, "Yeah, fantastic, we'll take some of those." And there's a gallery, one of the galleries in Helmsley. The lady there, Hillary's brilliant. She just wants anything I can paint. She'll take and she'll try and sell.
Right.
So that's lovely. So you've got that two-part thing. You've got Hillary saying, "Love your paintings." She'll put them on a wall. Somebody will buy them, and that's lovely as well.
Yes.
So all right, she takes a huge commission, but at least I get some money, and the paintings get sold. So there's that. There's also the people that come directly to me, and I suppose in some
And the people
ways,
that come directly to you are commissioning you, are they?
no, not
Or
necessarily.
buying privately from you?
Yeah, both of those. I mean, I do get people saying, "I do need this doing of my daughter," or any chance of a landscape for this person that's getting married or whatever, and that's lovely. And I quite enjoy the challenge of meeting a brief with the commission, and not all artists do, but I quite like that process of communication. Right, you want. What do you want? You want Beverly Westwood with the Minster? Do you want cows or not cows? They need to look like cows, or are you happy they might look like giraffes? That kind of thing is quite an interesting conversation. And then I had a lady and a fella and his wife came to my studio a couple of weeks ago, and I just got out everything I had, which was quite interesting because I didn't realise I had so much
Yes.
still at the studio. And she went round and she said, "Oh, if I'd have one of those, 6 of those. If I had a bigger house, I'd have that one." And it was just actually really nice because this woman clearly had seen my art somewhere,
Yes.
my painting somewhere, and was a fan. So you kind of think if people are buying, that's a real kind of lovely reinforcement of the fact that you're not completely talking out your backside. And I did spend a lot of time talking out my backside on the BBC. So trust me, I know about that kind of stuff, right?
So it's I always say that if I paint because I enjoy the process, and it's all about the journey mainly.
Yep.
But you have a finished piece at the end. A painting becomes finished.
Yeah.
And then what do you do with that painting
Yeah.
afterwards? So the well, not necessarily a logical step, but yeah, my step is I want somebody else to own it. I'd like it to go and live its life and
Be
do
on a
its
wall
purpose.
somewhere.
On a wall
Right,
somewhere
yeah.
in somebody else's house
Yeah.
or office or boardroom or whatever, because I'm done with it now.
Yeah.
It's taught me what I wanted it to
Yeah.
teach me. And for me, selling a painting it's reward and recognition. So it's a bit like on social media, somebody gives you a like or a comment or a share. It's a reward. You think, oh, somebody else likes it. That's great.
Yeah.
And the same if somebody's willing to pay money for your art, brilliant. It's a reward, and then you're recognised as actually trying to communicate something through the medium of painting. So
Because it's a difficult
but it's a
process.
reinforcement of you doing something right.
Yeah,
You
but
know,
it's a difficult
yeah.
process. And again, you can see paintings dotted around here that you've invested, time, love, effort, sweat, paint, all sorts of stuff in, and to have somebody come along and say, "Oh my God, I love that!" It's just that buzz
Yeah.
is fantastic.
Yeah.
And almost doesn't matter about how much money it is. It's just that somebody is happy to exchange some of their hard-earned cash for something you've put a lot of time and effort into. It's fabulous.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think if somebody loves a piece of art enough, it doesn't matter what price it is.
No.
So this is where, in a capitalist sort of system, we get a little bit into the trap of, you mentioned earlier about the cost of living crisis, maybe affected you being able to sell some paintings locally or, regionally at a certain price. But I think letting the price that you're charging for your art get in the way. So here's a question. Do you think about that while you're making the painting? Do you think about the economics of it? How much am I likely to sell? How much is this going to make me? Do you think?
Yes and no. I wouldn't ever start a large canvas just because I think, do you know what, this 1 metre square canvas I could sell at £2 per square inch or what. I don't tend to think that way. And I know artists that do, but I don't. I tend to think about, what have I got, what would suit this particular job, and how would it feel if I did this, that and the other. At some point I do kind of think, right, okay, if this is going to be sold, what would it be roughly? And in my head I have this £2 per square inch figure, which is a little bit toppy. It was good for a while, but I think linked in with this kind of cost of living thing you're saying, it's come down a little bit, and I'm probably at about £1.50 per square inch, or thereabouts for a painting.
So do you think reducing your price recently has increased sales?
No, I don't know. But that's the bizarre thing about the pricing thing. I'm not sure that actually within a couple of quid, people that see your paintings are that bothered. They probably want a deal, and that's absolutely fine.
Because my belief is that we shouldn't let monetarisation of art or the price we charge get in the way. I think I've got a theory that, monetarisation kills creativity, really. And it's almost, you shouldn't think about that while you're making a piece of work. In my mind, you need to make a piece of work because you want to make that piece of work. And if somebody else loves it,
great,
brilliant.
Yeah.
If nobody buys it because it's about finding your people and that painting finding its person. It's almost like it's got a destined person.
Yeah, it is.
And
Absolutely.
it just needs to meet that person,
Yeah, exactly.